Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Taylor Thomas, for Black Press USA and NNPA. Today's program, Fire. I do want to start before I introduce my first guest to take a moment to acknowledge the men and women service members who died in Kabul today after two explosions there. I know more information is going to be coming out, but I just couldn't start this program without sending my condolences to the family members that are there trying to protect our rights here in the U.S. I now would like to invite our very special guest. His name is Senator Michael Jackson, and I know he's with District 27 here in Maryland. He is joining us now because he is running for re-election, but there's so many things that are taking place here in Prince George's County, Calvert County, the state of Maryland, as well as across the country. So we're joining us now is Senator Jackson.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And so I know that you have a military background, you're a veteran, law enforcement, and I know hearing this news has to hit really close to home.
Look, I think whenever you're on a mission to serve others, to bring about good, and something like this happens, it just makes it all the more challenging for us, and it kind of resonates with everyone how challenging it is being a public servant. In that vein, and the men and women who sacrifice not only for themselves but their families and others. So obviously, we're all keeping them in our prayers, and wishing that families can find some sort of resolution in what these missions are all about. There's a need for it because we have to be safe, and thank God for the men and women who engage in such service. So thank you for the recognition, by the way.
Yeah, I know that you served for the Marine Corps, and I know that some of the members, they have not gone through all, of course, not releasing any names as of yet, but definitely identifying that some Marines and also military personnel, soldiers, were actually killed. So we're going to keep our hearts and our prayers as we continue tonight's program. Now, how does it go? I know you from Prince George's County. So I know that you were appointed to this position last year when Miller left. But how do you go from being a top cop, sheriff here in Prince George's County, to a senator for District 27?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, you have to have some blessings, right? Look, there are a multitude of ways to serve a constituency or to serve your community. I have been so blessed in my life to be able to serve in so many different capacities. I started out as in the county as a deputy sheriff. I became the union president, Fraternal Order Police Union president. I was blessed to be elected by the citizens of Prince George's County to be the elected sheriff of Prince George's County. I then went on to work for the Governor O'Malley, to do leadership development and public safety, because everything needs to be assessed. Everything we do needs to be assessed to ensure that the services that are provided are applicable to tomorrow. And then I got recruited by Senator Miller to run for delegate during the 2010, just after the 2010 redistricting, which, by the way, we're coming up upon the next redistricting that's coming up. And those are vital. Redistricting is vital because that means resources for communities. So I got, we ran, I got elected delegate, and I was representing Prince George's and parts of Calvert County. I ran for re-election in 2018. We were fortunate to be re-elected. And unfortunately, Senator Miller, the president of our Senate, took ill. And he was unable to finish his term. And he actually gave me the nod to replace him. And so I was appointed. I was sworn in on January 13th, the opening day of the 2021 legislative session. Got appointed, I got sworn in at 11 o'clock. And then the gavel dropped to open the General Assembly session at noon. So I had like an hour to kind of get myself situated. So, but I just think that if we sort of look at the multitude of challenges that we have, I probably could have continued to run for sheriff and continue to meet the needs from that perspective. You know, it would have been great. I had a great career with the Office of the Sheriff. But I sort of have this mindset of meeting the next challenge. And sometimes that challenge can't be met where you are. So I couldn't necessarily meet some of the challenges that I'm dealing with at the in the legislative office as a sheriff. I had been lobbying in Annapolis for quite a while, since the 90s. So I had become quite familiar with the lobbying side of things. But, I think it's a tremendous opportunity to address everything from education to healthcare to public safety, which was the sheriffing part of things, your environment, your infrastructure, economic development, and more from a legislative standpoint. So not only am I representing the 3 counties now I represent parts of Charles, parts of Calvert, and parts of Prince George's County, but I also represent the entire state of Maryland, which means we all have to work together to bring home the resources that are necessary to keep our communities moving. So to wrap that up, I think you probably need to be pretty blessed to have the opportunity. But I'm only appointed. And so we have an election in 2022. Next year, I will have 2 legislative sessions under my belt as senator for District 27. It is vital to me that the constituents that I'm honored to serve understand that they have access to me, as they always have. I've been in the political arena and service arena for all of my adult life, and so I want to make sure that they understand that as senator, they still have access to me, and I listen, and we want to meet their concerns.
Now you have right now, as of today, 1 contender, Jason Fowler, an attorney out of Frederick, Maryland, correct?
Prince Frederick, well, Calvert County. Exactly.
Calvert County, yeah, sorry, Calvert County. Yeah, because again, you mentioned you have part of Calvert County, parts of Prince George's County, and Charles County as well.
Yes, to date. But
to date, right, exactly.
It's still early, and so we'll see what happens. But we'll meet the challenge. And we have a record for 7 years. I've served the folks of Calvert County, and for 20 plus years, almost 30 years, I've served the citizens of Prince George's County. And for a year now, I've served, nearly a year, I've been serving Charles County. So we'll run on our record, and we will engage our constituency to find out what is necessary for our citizens to have their needs met, and as well as making sure that they are engaged with us going forward. So,
Senator Jackson, is it your years as the top sheriff of Prince George's County that you feel makes you the most qualified to continue to be a senator representing District 27?
It's part of it. Because I've had to engage as the sheriff of Prince George's County, the needs of folks, and those needs, span everything from dealing with crime to dealing with, other issues. Not every issue that a law enforcement officer engages in with the public is it's because of crime. Okay. But also, again, I've been lobbying Annapolis since 1996. I've been a legislator now for 7 years. So I have worked in Annapolis for 7 years. I sat on the appropriations committee, understand, how the funding works in the state of Maryland. Sat on appropriations for 6 years. Spent 1 year on judicial proceedings committee, and I've just been appointed to sit on the budget and taxation committee and
very important
in the Senate. So that, coupled with my extensive service and my working together with Prince George's County government officials, state of Maryland government officials, Calvert County government officials, puts me in a posture that doesn't matter whether folks are Republican or Democrats, they know that they can count on Michael Jackson to partner with them to bring about the services that are needed.
Senator Jackson, let's talk about the redistricting issue. And there's a lot going on with that, not just here, but all across the country. But what's happening here?
Well, the census numbers, we have the preliminary census numbers. It looks as if Prince George's County has grown. Charles County has grown significantly. Calvert a little bit. What happens with redistricting is constituencies have the opportunity through the legislature to benefit from the resources that come from redistricting. So economic development is huge. So if the district that I'm representing now covers 3 counties, if the representation from those 3 counties is weighted, towards a particular county, and when that county doesn't have the population, so Prince George's County is like 975,000 folks roughly. Charles County is 163,000 folks roughly, and Calvert is roughly 92,000 folks. So as we redistrict, once those the lines are drawn, we use that to bring about economic development, resources for our schools, our healthcare system. Prince George has over 200 schools. Calvert County has 25 schools. And so how do we ensure that we get resources to these jurisdictions? And that comes from the representatives that they have. That comes from the way the lines are drawn. If you have someone who has the skill set, who sat on the budget committees, kind of bring home the bacon, so to speak. Someone who understands the needs, whether they're healthcare resources or infrastructure resources, which we sorely need in Southern Maryland. So that skill set coupled with how the lines are drawn and the populations that are within those lines, help us get the resources we need.
Now, there's a list of things that I have. There's people that ask me questions, and what I'm really interested in, there's many things, but this is one thing. You actually served on the task force to study the commemoration of Harriet Elizabeth Brown. Can you quickly tell us about that?
Terrific. I tell you, so it's almost like if you don't know, you don't know. So Brown versus Board of Education, right?
Yeah.
So we think about the 1950s, but Brown versus Board of Education, for the listeners, I couple that with Calvert County. In 1937, a single Black female teacher sued the school system because Black teachers, females in particular, were making roughly half as much as white teachers were. This is 1937 in Calvert County, Maryland. Can you imagine?
No.
The courage of that young lady to sue the school system. And she won. But beyond that, when I talk about Brown versus Board of Education, Thurgood Marshall was sitting on a bench, correct? 1937, the attorney for Harriet Elizabeth Brown was Thurgood Marshall. He was an NAACP attorney. He represented Harriet Elizabeth Brown back in 1937 in that particular case. So I say Brown versus Board of Education actually started in Maryland. So
wow. So have they moved forward? Have they selected if they're going to do something in commemoration of her, or it's still in the talks?
No. Actually, we've had at least 3 different versions of commemorating her. There's a portrait in the courthouse because back then the Board of Education was seated in the courthouse. So there's a portrait, a beautiful portrait of her. There's a community center being erected as we speak.
Exciting.
There's also a highway that's been named after her, Route 2, between I think it said Route 4 and 2, going toward Annapolis. So there are a number of ways that we're looking to commemorate her. But I can tell you, again, Maryland has a storied history, and it ain't all bad. But at the end of the day, it's always bad if you don't know. And so I sat on that task force. I was the only elected official that sat on it. Most others sent other folks there, and I learned so much about that. There's a scholarship that's set up for Black females who want to become educators. So there's scholarship funds as well that's associated with that task force.
So exciting.
Probably one of the
Really
highlights of my legislative career, sitting on that task force. So I will say that publicly. So.
And you have a long list of things that you've done, but I'm only going to hit a couple of them because people were asking me. So I'm going to run through these really quick. So what is next generation 911 in Maryland?
Oh my God. So as we know, technology is so advanced, and it moves so rapidly that we need to keep up. 911, you dial 911, you get someone on the other end of the phone, and they try to answer your concern and dispatch fire or emergency services, medical services, or law enforcement. But with today's technology, there are ways that we can actually text 911, so you don't have to dial the number. But the advancement of that commission, you can now text photographs and recordings to 911, where you weren't able to do that. You weren't able to do that before. So last year, the entire state of Maryland moved to text 911. Prior to that, Frederick County was the only county that had that because they have the Maryland School of the Deaf,
Okay.
right? So they needed to be able to communicate. But next generation 911 puts those officials under the public safety umbrella, which enhances their ability for trainings and education, as well as compensation. But most importantly, what it does is it ensures a multifaceted way of citizens getting the help that they need. And like everything, if we don't assess the processes that we have in place, we're going to continue to fall behind. So this commission has been going on for nearly 4 years now, because tackling different ways of making sure that everyone who needs help. Remember, there are places in our state that we saw it with COVID, the education. There's a challenge with internet access, broadband access. Sometimes your cell phone doesn't work in some places, right? We need to be able to locate you. If you're in a building that multi-unit building, we may know in the past we knew this, they may have known the address of where you were, but we didn't know the unit you were in. Every second counts. So
it
now
really does. And Senator Jackson, you talking about reevaluating and assessing. Where are you on the stance of police basically regrouping them and just kind of setting the pace and getting dealing with the issues of the number of African-American women and men and brown people who have died at the hands of law enforcement? Where are you on this issue?
Well, I think, look, first of all, right is right and wrong is wrong. I think, again, every thing that we deal with needs to be assessed, and we need to move in the right direction. That takes courage, But when cultures are developed, it takes courage to change them for the better. We also need to be very careful not to have knee-jerk reactions to things. There's a need for change. Let's work together with all stakeholders and make the necessary changes. Knee-jerk reactions just get us, sometimes they're placated because of political whim. Other times they're placated because of, maybe some actions that are going on at the time. But, if you look at my career as the sheriff of Prince George's County and as the director of public safety, leadership development and public safety, which was created because of this very thing, we need to make changes. We also need to assess the fact that every call may not necessarily need the police. Now, I can tell you, having been an agency head, that oftentimes the legislature or the local government will say, give this particular function to law enforcement. It may not be a typical law enforcement function. And most often that comes without resources, so unfunded mandates. So I think we need to evaluate everything that law enforcement does. And does it take a law enforcement officer to do that? Does it take a law enforcement officer coupled with someone else, other professionals, to do that? And I think we ought to have the courage to step in that direction. But I think we need to make sure that we're also, bringing in the true stakeholders, whether it's mental health personnel, whether it's education personnel, or whether it's law enforcement personnel.
Senator Jackson, are you doing anything right now legislatively to make the changes that you believe need to be taken part here in the state of Maryland?
Yes, 2021 legislative session was quite a lively legislative session regarding police reform. I am the only member of the entire General Assembly who sat in both chambers at the beginning of police reform and then ended up on the Senate side. So yeah, there's some accountability measures that we put in place. There's a couple more that you'll see. I'll be the chief sponsor on one. In 2016, we created the Maryland Police Training Standards Commission. That Standards Commission, the intent of it then was to be the regulatory commission. Regulatory commissions can turn on a dime to make the necessary changes. Legislatures can't. Legislatures can't. We're not the United States Congress. We're only in session for 90 days. So we need to put that authority where it belongs. But we don't just leave that with law enforcement personnel there. When that was created, we had 4 legislators sitting on that panel, as well as 4 civilians, which included mental health personnel, community folks. And so you have a broad perspective of what's actually needed as we did the Justice Reform, Justice Reinvestment Act and some other measures. So I think we need to put the onus where it needs to be. And it's always about accountability. And we need to hold folks to that. But also be mindful that we have to assess to make sure we're getting what we want to get and not creating any additional damages.
And I have to ask you, and I know our time is about to run out, but I have to ask you 2 things. Anything that you're doing, you know, there are millions of Americans that will lose their homes if the mortgage coverage is not taken care of. You know, I know there's a debate still going on. Is there anything that's taking place in Maryland that will help thousands of families that face losing their homes if this moratorium is not extended?
Yes, the General Assembly will be revisiting that. We spent extensive amount of time on it during the January through April session regarding that. We do know that there's an October date that's coming up. We're in conversations with Congressman Hoyer yesterday regarding how we can partner with the federal government and for state legislators to kind of come to some sort of balance. So, for instance, federal dollars that come into states are handled by local governments if you have more than 200,000 people. Well, Charles County doesn't have more than 200,000 people. Neither does Calvert County. Now that money has to come. Now the state has to disperse those funds. The funds that are being dispersed are not only to pay Michael Jackson's rent, because I'm behind him on rent, but it's also to make sure that the landlord is made whole. And so we need to make sure that everyone is made whole in the process. That's what our judicial system was created to do. That's where the sheriff came from, to help folks get to court to make you whole. So we are working to kind of, how do we deflect the fact that if this ends in October, I don't have a year and a half worth of rent because I've been out of a job to be able to recover. Now there's some monies that were associated that came through the states from the federal government that can cover anywhere from 4 months to almost a year, almost up to a year. The key is that are those dollars being properly released?
And that's what I've heard. I heard that there's maybe not just our state, because I'm in Maryland today, but not just the state of Maryland, but the actual disbursement, finding a system that can do it so that people that aren't trying to take it fraudulently get access to money that's desperately needed by people who qualify. So is that something that Maryland is dealing with as well?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah,
okay.
The General Assembly has, we have it for the unemployment insurance folks. We have it for the landlord tenant folks. Yes, so we are certainly looking at that matter, and the key is the disbursement of dollars, and no one can keep up when you've been out of work that long. So what's going to happen if we don't come up with a mechanism to take care of that? And the General Assembly is working on that. And again, if there's anyone out there in the audience that wants to be a part of this, you can go to the Maryland General Assembly website. You can click on the tab that deals with landlord and tenant or the eviction moratorium, or the unemployment insurance challenges, the COVID challenges. I mean, we are working diligently on all these matters, but we are a part-time legislator, but you are full-time citizens, so we need your input. So contact me at any time in my office, Michael.Jackson at Senate.mrna md.us. I'm sorry, michael.jackson@state.maryland.md.us. I messed that up. I know.
That's a tongue twister, right? It's a tongue
Yeah,
twister.
but it's the Maryland General Assembly website. You can click on and then contact us. And I hope to visit you all again soon, where we can have live audience questions tuning in. October, November, and December, Ms. Taylor, District 27, we're going to have listening sessions
Okay.
about what our community needs before we go back to Annapolis. So we will definitely look to post those with you to make sure we can get that information out. But contact me at any time if there's any particular concerns. And I'm looking forward to working with any and everybody to help us get beyond where we are. Everybody stay safe. We aren't through the COVID,
Definitely.
yet.
Definitely.
Our children are going back to school and grandchildren are going back to school. So we need to make sure everybody stays safe. Look, I think this is a tremendous opportunity for us. There's a change in District 27 in the leadership, but we are ripe for that change, and we are ripe for what tomorrow needs, and we are definitely ready to bring our constituency what they deserve.
And Senator Jackson, we have 1 minute left, but I have to ask you this. Are you in support of businesses requiring their workers to get vaccinated now that the FDA has given it full approval?
I actually believe that if you're a business that's getting money from the government, if you're a government business, absolutely. We're doing it in Prince George's County. I'm actually a Prince George's County employee. You either get vaccinated or you have to go through the testing, the multiple testings and the verification process. So there's a process you either go through or you get vaccinated. I am all for that because I think the FDA has now approved it and we got to be safe. We got to be safe. So.
Senator Michael Jackson of District 27. Again, thank you so very much. We'll have to check back in with you. I really do appreciate you working us in your schedule because I think you're about to take a flight out of town. So again, yes. Thank you so much, Senator Michael Jackson. I want to thank you for taking part. All right, so the second part of our show, before I bring this guest on, I want the producer to bring up something that I want to read before I introduce our next guest. Take a look at this. All right, so this is a post from the FDA, Dr. Peter Marks. It reads, our scientific and medical experts conducted an incredibly thorough and thoughtful evaluation of this vaccine. We're talking about the COVID-19 vaccine. We evaluated scientific data and information included in hundreds of thousands of pages, conducted our own analysis of Comirnaty's safety and effectiveness, and performed a detailed assessment of the manufacturing process, including inspections of the manufacturing facilities. The director went on to say, we have not lost sight of the COVID-19 public health crisis continues in the U.S. and that the public is counting on safe and effective vaccines. The public and medical community can be confident that although we approved this vaccine expeditiously, it was fully in keeping with our existing high standards for vaccines in the U.S. We are talking again about COVID because really major change took place since the last time we spoke, which was last week, and the FDA gave final approval to Pfizer's vaccine for COVID-19. And tonight, we are opening up the phone lines as we do, or, you text us your message, we can post it here, and you can ask her any question. We are talking about the COVID-19. We have an expert. She is Dr. Gertie Chimeka-Anyanwoke, and she's an infectious disease expert. Any question you have about COVID, the vaccines, she can answer it. Please welcome her to the show. Hello. We have to take you off of mute. There we go. How are you, doctor?
I am fine. Thank you for having me.
I am very, very excited. And I know that you have a presentation. I have so many questions for you. And I know we only have 30 minutes, so I'm going to get right into it. Let's learn a little bit about your medical background, and then let's talk about COVID and this new vaccine that's been approved, full approval, that is.
Yes, hi. I went to medical school in Lagos, Nigeria, University of Lagos to be precise. I did my residency at New York Metropolitan Hospital, New York Medical College, and I did fellowship at North Shore University, Long Island Jewish Health Center with the NYU Medicine Program, fellowship for infectious disease over there. And I've been practicing in Louisiana for the past 13 years as an infectious disease consultant.
Now, Dr. Anyanwoke, COVID, this is far from over. I mean, this is starting a new era with this Delta virus. Can you just once again, for us, our audience, define what COVID-19 is?
COVID-19 is a virus that's a simple organism, and it's a coronavirus which is new. It's not, coronaviruses have been known for hundreds of years, but this particular coronavirus is new. We've never seen this type before, exactly because its characteristics also are different. In the past, coronaviruses will cause things like catarrh, sneezing, and some aches and cold. But this particular virus has shown itself to be very hyper-inflammatory, and in that hyper-inflammatory setting, it causes a lot of damage to our blood vessels, so it can cause blood clots in every organ you can think about. And so some people get the COVID toe, which is like blue toe, blue-black, and some people get, blood clots in their lungs, in their brains, in their liver, you name any organ. So it's so far-reaching, and it depends on which organ you're getting this blood clot, the manifestation of that illness will show. Generally, it could make people very sick. As usual, a lot of viruses have a spectrum. Some people might get COVID and not really have much of a symptom, and some people might get COVID and actually have a stroke. So in that spectrum, we find ourselves, but it is shown itself to be highly virulent and can be deadly.
So in the medical world, you guys, are you really concerned about this and the lack of people being vaccinated?
Oh, it's a big concern, because vaccination is going to be our one major way of getting out of this. If majority of us in the community vaccinate, the vaccination tends to protect us from the virus. And even when we get the infection, which is not that common, we also will have less symptoms.
Okay.
And that would mean less hospitalization, and that means less death. So it is necessary for majority of us to get vaccinated, and that is how we can protect a few of us that may not be able to get vaccinated for whatever reason.
So let me tell you, one of the questions that came into me before we actually went live was, if you can be vaccinated and still pass on the COVID-19, they're saying, what's the purpose of getting it?
Oh, there is a good purpose. So you have to think about it this way. I usually give this analogy of seat belts. So we all know when we drive our car, there's a possibility that we can have accident, but we don't have accidents every day. But if you have accident and you're wearing your seatbelt, it tends to help to minimize the impact on you, the driver.
Good analogy.
Yes. So
Yeah.
so when somebody bangs the back, you don't flip out of the window. The seatbelt keeps you in place, and that you might feel some soreness, but you will be alive. So
I like that analogy.
Yeah, getting the vaccine doesn't mean that, oh, you may not be able to get the virus at all. What it means is that even if you get the virus, the infection will be much milder than it will be if you did not get the vaccine, such that you don't have severe illness and less hospitalization, and the risk of death is less.
Another question that came in, and this is one I've heard a lot of people talking about, and this is from a gentleman out of Georgia who has not been vaccinated, and he said, how long do mRNA spike proteins last in the body? Okay, maybe you can define what the mRNA is for those who don't know.
So the mRNA is the messenger RNA. ribonucleic acid. So going back a little bit to biology, we have DNA, and the DNA can translate the RNA. And a lot of times, so we have a lot of proteins in our body. The messenger RNA is involved in production of those proteins. How the body sends the genetic material over is like, it gives that messenger RNA an information. Okay, you take this, go over here, produce this kind of protein. And so when the messenger RNA gets there, it's like you want to go to an exam, you cram the information, you get into the exam, you vomit the information on the paper, and you're done. The messenger RNA gets scavenged out like other waste product. It's done its job.
So then it doesn't change a
all.
person's mRNA. The vaccine does not change
your DNA. No, it doesn't. Why? Because if you look at the cell biology, and some of us did science or biology in school, and you look at the cell itself, you have the cell wall, you have the cell cytoplasm, and then you have the nucleus. The nucleus is where the DNA is contained, the genetic material. The messenger RNA never gets to the nucleus. It stays in the cell cytoplasm, where it uses the ribosomes that's in the cytoplasm and other enzymes to produce the spike protein that now allows our body to respond to that spike protein, producing antibodies against COVID. At no time does it get to your nucleus. So when it doesn't get to your nucleus, how can it now change your DNA? It's not possible. And it's been a lot of misinformation out there that needs to be corrected.
So what about this question? This one, when I got this in, I couldn't believe it. So I've read that people with more melanin normally have less spike proteins in their body. How will or could the increase affect people of color?
If people with more melanin, which all of us that are Black have more melanin.
Yes.
But if you notice, when COVID first started, it affected a lot of Black people. I don't necessarily think that melanin is a factor here. What's a factor is other comorbidities. I found out that people that are obese tends to get the worst end of the stick. People with diabetes, hypertension, people that are older, maybe about 65, because their immune system is, is not as good as it should have been. And people with cancer, people with immunosuppressed conditions or taking immunosuppressed medications, those people have a higher risk. And if you come look at the Black community, we have a lot of these diseases. We have a lot of diabetes, hypertension, congestive heart failure. We have obesity. A lot of that will, affect us. And at the time when COVID started, it affected a lot of Black people because a lot of us were doing the direct service jobs. But melanin is not really a factor here.
So that's where the problem came in, because I believe that that's where people, whites, thought that it didn't affect them. And maybe the misinformation came that way, because it did seem like Blacks were being affected, and we're seeing, and then I think there was things with the president at the time that was like, listen, we're good.
Yeah, we would like to be good.
Right.
As at this time, we need to do what we need to do to protect ourselves and our families.
Well, I know that you put together a presentation we may not be able to get through, but some of the graphic things that you have here showing the cell, I'm going to have my producer pop this up, and I'm going to let you take this away, Dr. Gertie Chimeka-Anyanwoke.
Thank you. Thank you. So over here, it shows I'm the chair of the Association of Nigerian Physicians in the Americas COVID-19 task force, and I represent them a lot in a lot of presentations I do. You can move to the next slide. So this is the virus itself, and I want people to understand that there are a lot of features on this virus that can be used to target drugs and vaccines. At this time, they have chosen to use the spike protein, which is this one right here.
Okay, I see.
You see the spike on the virus. That's where they're getting, because if you can target the spike protein and prevent the spike protein from getting into the cells, then you can prevent infection. Really, that's what the idea is for the vaccine. Move to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is the life cycle where it shows the ACE2 receptor. That's how the spike protein of the virus uses to attach to this receptor and gains entry into our cell. But when it gets into the cell, there's a lot of processes that goes on. There's replication. Here is an assembly where you're making the new virus, and it's like millions of these are being produced at any time. So next one, please. So I would like to answer common vaccine questions in our community: why the hesitancy, if the vaccines work, safety, and if it's effective. Move to the next one, please. Okay, so the risk for COVID-19 infection and hospitalization and death by race and ethnicity, this has actually changed. It is now better. But even as it is better, you can still see that the minority communities tend to have more cases of COVID, more cases of hospitalization, more cases of death as compared to the white non-Hispanic persons. Next slide, please. So race, ethnicity of people receiving a COVID vaccine in the US as of August 16, 2021, which is about 10 days ago. If you look at here on the right, the population of the US is about 61%. And if you look at over here, and the population of the white persons, non-Hispanic, about 61%. And if you look at the total people that have taken at least one dose of the vaccine, we have 58%. It used to be that you had I think about 50-something% of white people had taken the vaccine at the beginning, and about 5.4% of Black people. Now we have about 10%. Well, in the normal population of the US, we have about 12% that are Black. So we're still a little behind. And the Hispanic is about 17%, and it's 17% of the normal population. So they're fine. But if you look at what has happened in the last 2 weeks, and I think it's because of this Delta variant, you have more of the minority communities. Look at the Black people, the Hispanic people getting more of the vaccine even than the white people. Next slide, please. So most unvaccinated adults say getting the vaccine is a bigger risk to their health than the coronavirus. I mean, if you look at here, you find out that a lot of the unvaccinated people, they'll tell you that getting the vaccine itself is the bigger problem. And amongst them, they are more worried about, their concern is the safety and the fact that the vaccine was produced so fast. Next slide, please. So there are a lot of reasons why people are hesitant. Some people, is what I just said about their concerns. Some people don't believe, they don't trust the government. Some other people are anti-vaxxers. Some people have perhaps, risk and history of allergies to other things, and they're just worried. But in the Black community, it's mainly because we don't trust the system. There's a lot of skepticism, there's a lot of hesitancy, because there has been in the past racism in medicine, in the healthcare and government policies. We know about the Tuskegee experiment of 1932, and we know about the Henrietta Lacks case. All these are the history in the Black community, and that's why even today in the present healthcare system, Black people don't feel that they are given equal treatment in the healthcare community. And so you can understand why a lot of Black people are hesitant and skeptical. Next slide, please. So there's been a lot of work that has been done on the messenger RNA vaccine. This doctor, Dr. Kathleen Carrico, started working on this particular utilizing messenger RNA technology to combat disease about 30-something years ago. She tried at that time, I think in 1990, she made it to work in mice in the University of Wisconsin. The problem they encountered then was that synthetic RNA was unstable. And in that unstable state, it could lead to immune response with unintended risk to some patients.
This is a big deal because you just said this was started 30 years ago. And I think most people, Americans, were thinking you did this within weeks, and it's not the case.
Oh, no, it's not the case. The technology started about 30 years ago. And at that time, they were thinking of using it to combat diseases. Because like I described before, messenger RNA, you send it to go a message, produce this protein, and then it's gone off and it's scavenged out. So they felt like utilizing that technology, you can correct a lot of diseases like diabetes, like hypertension, asthma, a lot of stuff that could be potentially used for. But it was, so in 2005, they figured out how to solve the problem they found, which kind of delayed the work for 15 years. And so they were able to solve that problem by getting the lipid nano, to wrap the messenger RNA in something to prevent it from disintegrating. So in 2020, what happened is that all that preparation of about 30 years met an opportunity during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Wow.
Next slide, please. This is Dr. Kezie Corbett. She's part of the team of scientists in the NIH that worked on the Mrna vaccine. The reason I added her here is to show that Black people, people in the minority community have been part of this work. Even in our Nigeria, I'm originally from Nigeria. There's a lot of doctors that have Nigerian heritage that were part of this work. A lot of them I served in committee with that were investigators. So we are involved in it. It's not like somebody coming to tell us a story. If we didn't believe in it, we would not take it ourselves. Next slide, please. Okay, so vaccines work. And I just want you to see this big bubble over here. This is in 1950 Ireland. And the only difference between this 1950 and 2019 is that vaccination was introduced for measles. And you see the bubble is so small now.
Yes.
That is what vaccine does. Diphtheria, polio, they are all zero. And look at that. So that's why we know that vaccines work. Next slide, please. So how do they work? You give the messenger RNA for spike protein, you inject it in the muscle, and then it goes into the body, gets into the cell, and produces the spike protein. That spike protein now triggers the production of antibodies to that specific spike protein. So the next time you come in contact with COVID, your body is ready to fight it.
Wow.
Next slide, please. Remember the translation process I talked about earlier, where
Yes.
the DNA is translated into messenger RNA. So this messenger RNA is now translated into amino acids. I want you to watch here. Each of these codon is an amino acid. So you have each of these codon that forms these amino acids that now form a polypeptide chain that folds into protein. If you, in production of this is how mutations occur. Instead of having GUA here, it could change to GUU. And that amino acid is now different. And so when it forms that protein, that strain of the virus will be a different strain.
Oh my goodness.
And it could be consequential or it may not be consequential. And that is how we get these different variants that we're talking about. Next slide, please.
Your graphics are just amazing, by the way. It is so easy to put it together, even though I don't have a scientific background. So this is wonderful.
So some people ask if the process was rushed. Yes, it was. And that was because they had to accelerate it because the COVID-19 pandemic was really hitting the whole world, all the population. Everything was shut down. And so the governments had to come together, different parts of the world, different scientists. They had to put all their resources together. They had to put all their knowledge together to be able to combat this. Next slide, please. So I wanted to show a little bit of what happened. Normally, it might take about 10 years to produce a vaccine because that's all the processes they have to go through. The pharmaceutical industries have to spend their money. So they have to go through one phase because a lot of times this stuff may not work and they will waste all that money. So they want to do it stage by stage. But what happened is with all the previous knowledge that we have of coronaviruses that have been in existence for dozens and dozens of years, with the technology we had, they put the research and development process. Normally it would be here, take months. They just added it together with like trying the phase 1 of the trial. Phase 1 of the trial, usually what it's looking for is safety. Is it safe to take this medication? Is it safe to give this vaccine to human beings? So once they had done that, because the animal studies would have been done with the research and development. So once they had done this phase 1 trial, they knew it was safe. So they got to go ahead from the government. It's like, okay, we're going to pump so much money. The pharmaceutical industries did not have to spend their money.
Yeah, we heard about that. That's when the government said they were going to support when Trump was in office and he found the one that he wanted to back financially. And I think people were kind of puzzled about that because we never knew about that process before.
Yes. So because they put the money down, like, okay, we know the vaccine is safe. Okay, we don't know if it will work. Then we are ready to put this money down for you to start producing it. Just in case if it works, we don't have to wait for you to manufacture it. So they started manufacturing when they started the phase 2 trials. And so when they started phase 2 trials, shortly after they started phase 3 trials. And that phase is usually for you to watch out for efficacy and how the vaccine will actually work. So it's mainly safety and efficacy. The first phase is safety. Next slide, please. Again, this is what I just described in the above diagram, but in another form. Next slide. I just wanted to show that no corners were cut, and that usually large studies before COVID would be maybe 4,000 to 5,000 people. But are you looking at the numbers we have here? We had
Yes.
37,000 for Pfizer before it was given the emergency use authorization. Moderna was 30,000, AstraZeneca 30, J&J was 60,000, and all of the others were thousands. These are not usual numbers in studies. Next slide, please. Okay, so minorities were included in this study. I've gotten a lot of people have asked me that question. About 10% of the people in the study were minorities. Remember, we're Black people. The total population of Black people in America is 12%.
Okay, that's a high number.
About 26% of the people were Hispanic and 8% were Asians. 51% of them were male, 49% were female. Next slide, please. Is the vaccine safe? As apparently, yes, because as of today, we have more than 5 billion shots that have been given worldwide. In the US, as of a couple of days ago, it was 363 million doses that have been administered. And so in those 360-something million doses that have been administered, I can't tell you how many people that would say have had such deleterious effect leading to death. But we know that we have about 37 million cases of COVID in America reported since last year. And we've had 600 and something thousand deaths from those 37 million cases. So you can see that the vaccines are really safe in taking care of us. Next slide, please. Okay, this is what I was explaining earlier on about the DNA. Yes. So if you look at this cell, this is the cytoplasm, this is the cell membrane, this is the nucleus, this is the ribosome. You give the injection, it gets in here, the messenger RNA comes here, uses these ribosomes and other enzymes right here in the cell cytoplasm to produce the spike protein that now stimulates our immune system to produce antibodies. At no time does it get to the nucleus. The nucleus is where our DNA is. And so if it didn't get there, it cannot affect the DNA. A lot of things that I've heard, sometimes I'm surprised, like shocked, where did that come from? So this is the explanation of it. It cannot affect or change your DNA because it doesn't even get to your nucleus. Next slide. Okay, so I talked about lipid nanoparticles before. These are very tiny fat molecules, fat bubbles that are used to enclose the messenger RNA. Okay. And that technology is called the hydrogel nanotechnology to deliver the messenger RNA vaccine. It is not microchips. Just because you use nanotechnology to make microchips does not mean that the hydrogel nanotechnology is now microchips that they put.
So that's where the thing where people are saying you're being followed and they're tracking you.
So yeah, they think that they put that chip and that the government is tracking you. There's another, and this is a misinformation totally, because this is not true. There's another slide I'm going to show about the Pfizer. Please, next slide, please. Yeah, so I don't know if people can see this very well, but this is how Pfizer packaged the vaccine. So they put the vaccine in these boxes and then put this box in a bigger box, and then this bigger box in dry ice to keep the temperature, because it needed ultra low temperatures to keep it from getting bad. And then they put a thermometer in that dry ice, and this thermometer had a tracking device to know where this package is at every time. At no time was the tracking device inside the vaccine itself. It was just put in the dry ice to know the temperature of the package and to track the package itself. So it's not tracking us as in the vaccine itself. Next slide.
That's a pretty good safety thing to know where it is and if the temperature at any point drops below what you guys require it to stay safe.
Exactly. And so I've heard of people talk about 666 mark of the beast. That's not true. It has nothing to do with the COVID-19 vaccine. It's just unfortunate that some people have been peddling this misinformation and inducing fear amongst members of our communities. Next slide, please. So there are side effects to the COVID vaccine: soreness in the arm, pain, swelling. Some people might have fever, chills, body ache, headache. A lot of us take Tylenol or ibuprofen or talk to your doctor for your specific case. But a lot of times you drink plenty of fluids, wear light clothing, These are things that are uncomfortable, yes, but they last a day or two and it's done with. It's far better than getting COVID itself, because in getting COVID, there's the risk of getting the long COVID, which is the post-COVID syndrome.
Yes.
Where people,
yes.
I've in clinic today, I attended to patients that are suffering from this as a result of the fact that they got COVID, they're short of breath, they still have memory fog and all that. I would rather take the vaccine, have those mild symptoms, in fact, when I had the symptom, I took ibuprofen and I was fine within an hour. So that's what I will advise people to do. Yes, it might be a little uncomfortable. Now, next slide. Are there serious side effects? They are rare, but possible. Like penicillin, I am an infectious disease doctor. I give people penicillin. Some people have bad allergies to penicillin. Some people have allergies to crawfish. Some people have allergies to seafood. That's something that is known for. And they carry epinephrine. If you give them epinephrine, most of them are fine. And so, but if you have such allergy, you can discuss with your doctor. I have patients who have allergy issues. What I do is I prep them before they go in, and none of them have had any issues with the vaccine. Next slide, please. Okay. Is it safe for me to get a COVID-19 vaccine if I would like to have a baby one day? Yes. The vaccine.
That's a big one.
Yeah. People who want to get pregnant in the future may receive the COVID-19 vaccine. There is absolutely no evidence that antibodies formed from COVID-19 vaccination cause any problems with pregnancy, whether male or female. There's no fertility issues here. And in addition, I don't know of any evidence suggesting that fertility problems are side effect of any vaccine, not just COVID vaccine. Okay. So I know people were peddling that, but that's not true. Next slide, please. Will the vaccine make me sick with COVID-19? No. Like I said, the messenger RNA vaccines are synthetic product. So they don't contain the vaccine. They cannot give you COVID. Thank you. Wow. I think I will stop there in case other people have questions.
And I do. This is a real important one. I know we have about 3 minutes left. You're listening now to Dr. Gertie Chimeka-Anyanwoke. She's an infectious expert doctor, and we are so excited to have her here because there's so many questions. And I'm telling you, you are checking out the box. People are texting me and saying, "Geez, I wanted to know about that. I heard that too." This is a really good one. This person said that they contracted COVID-19. They've now been cleared of it, but how long do they have to wait to get the vaccine?
So if it depends on if the person got monoclonal antibody or got some plasma transfusion, because those ones have antibodies. If they got that monoclonal antibody, they have to wait for 90 days before they can get the vaccine. If they did not get the monoclonal antibody, I would advise maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks after they recover, they can go get the shot.
And so if you get COVID, is it possible you can get it again? And
I mean, absolutely. I have had patients who had COVID 4 times since last year. 4 times. And my patient, one that had COVID back to back, had COVID end of November, had COVID beginning of January.
So that makes, I would think if a person wasn't getting vaccinated and they say, "Oh, I've had it 3 times, I'm strong enough." I hear so many people saying, "I'm strong enough to fight this virus," and it's beyond that, right?
It's beyond that. So the truth is that some diseases, when you actually have the disease and produce natural immunity, it may work better than the vaccine. Also, there are other diseases where when you get the vaccine gives you a more stronger immunity than the disease. When COVID first started, we weren't too sure. But right now, the data is amassing that the vaccine actually might be a little better than the natural immunity, because we're seeing a lot of people who got the vaccine, who got COVID multiple times, and are still getting COVID. I just had a patient last week who had COVID, had COVID a few times, ended up in hospital with bilateral both pneumonias, still got COVID. And so a lot of times their risk factors also, counts. I'm not saying that natural immunity doesn't give any protection at all, but I think it is advisable if you can get the vaccine.
And so lastly, I have to ask you, what are your thoughts about who should get the booster shot and if it even should be given out?
Okay, so I think that the booster shots will be necessary, especially for the immunocompromised, but maybe for all of us or majority of us eventually, depending on when you got your second dose. It's unfortunate that a lot of people outside America and in third world countries have not even gotten the first shot. And here we are, we have gotten the second shot and we're about to get the third shot. That's just food for thought. And so we should consider how lucky we are that we're here and that we can get this. And so when you see people saying, no, I don't want to get it for whatever reason, consider the fact that there are a lot of people, millions of people in the world that cannot even get the first shot.
Dr. Gertie Chimeka-Anyanwoke, you are phenomenal, and I have enjoyed this conversation. My phone is going crazy here, so hopefully it wasn't coming through on the microphone. I look forward to talking to you at the first of the year and seeing where we are as a country and as a world as it pertains to really combating COVID-19. I can't thank you enough. And any closing words to people either who have the vaccine or those who are thinking about taking the vaccine?
So my closing word would be that you look at your risk and you look at your benefits. The risk of getting COVID is real. And in getting COVID, you can end up having the post-COVID syndrome, which I have a friend who had COVID in May last year, still having memory issues, having headaches, having shortness of breath. Think about protecting yourself, protecting your family, protecting your community, if you don't want to do it for yourself. And so I ask people to get their information from the CDC instead of all these social media people that are giving you information that may not necessarily be true or have truths. I found a lot of misinformation is out there and even disinformation. So please go to the right source. You can trust the CDC. The CDC has no reason why it should lie to its population.
Dr. Gertie Chimeka-Anyanwoke, you are phenomenal. Again, thank you so much for joining the show. We went over, I'm sorry, I know this was great. I could talk to her for hours. Again, I want to thank you for coming on the show and giving us factual information. She's an infectious disease expert. She knows what she's talking about. So I wanted to make sure you heard it directly from her. And thank you so much for that visual presentation. All right, next week, we are going to Croatia. So make sure you join us right here at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Again, God bless and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.